All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, another round of applause for one of the best technologists of our generation, Thomas Dohmke. Former CEO of GitHub and now building Entire. How are you, Thomas?
I'm great, and I think the instructions where you should sit there. But
let's do it. Okay. Well, we can go a little bit like this, you know. But how you doing today? How's your week been?
It's amazing. It's so lovely to be in Athens. Weather is beautiful. I really love this conference and how relaxed everything is, how many amazing people I can meet. And of course, you know, I couldn't survive the day without spinning up my coding agents. Who here is running an agent right now? Yes, that's the way to go. Open Codex or Claude, remote control, and have somebody coding for you while you're wasting your time listening to us. Don, what agents have you run in the last week as an investor?
So, you know, as a venture capitalist, we're constantly on the lookout for the next breakout founder. Folks like Thomas Dohmke, we're looking for the next Jensen Huang, the next Elon Musk. How do you do it? Well, what we've done is we've created an agent that actually parses out data, and here at the conference, we're on the lookout, because I know there are a lot of founders out here in the audience. You know, who's going to be that person? And those agents have enabled that.
Awesome.
You know, so, but I think you've been working through some different things this week as well. Were you working on a hackathon yesterday? Is that right?
Yeah, so yesterday we were at a hackathon here in Athens called Zone 01. It's a coding school. If you know 42 in Paris, it's a similar concept like this. And there were about, I think, 60, 65 hackers working on AI projects, you know, building with AI an AI solution of the future. It was an amazing time for us because we, as a startup, Entire, you know, our solution is to collect all the session logs, your coding agent logs, you know, from Cloud Code, from Codex, from Pi, from whatever agent you prefer, and store them together with all the agent logs of your team in a database. And at a hackathon, obviously, that's super cool because it allows all the team members and the judges to look into these logs. They can kind of figure out who has been cheating and has been working before the hackathon. But you can also see, you know, what have they learned during the hackathon, what prompts did they use. You can use that for grading, and obviously for us as a startup, the most important thing, other than, you know, promoting our brand and whatnot, is to learn. You know, so many people came over and had problems with onboarding. You know, we're in this age of AI that hasn't gone away as a startup, that you have to think about onboarding, that you have to think about your user journey. You know, somebody comes with an old Windows laptop and your library doesn't support it. So we had a lot of fun yesterday on doing that, and we will do more in the months to come.
It's fascinating. And, you know, for many years, you built GitHub inside of Microsoft, and now you yourself are building from scratch. You met a bunch of developers at the hackathon building from scratch. You probably had a lot of empathy for them. What's the psychology of starting anew, of going after a larger problem and ideating in the early days, raising capital? Tell us more about that experience of building from scratch.
I would say there's never been a better time to be a startup founder, or, if you will, a developer. You know, I started coding in the early 1990s in East Berlin, first on an East German Robotron computer. If you're from Germany, you know what I'm talking about. If not, don't worry, it is not relevant. And then I had a Commodore 64, and I had so many ideas, you know, as a 12, 13-year-old, and I was only constrained by my technical skills of converting idea into real software, and by the time, right? Like, how much time did I have before I had to go to bed and go to school and learn all the useless knowledge that schools teach us compared to what I actually do as a founder. And that has dramatically shifted in the last year, if not in the last 6 months. Now I have so many ideas and so many agents running that I can not only, you know, code on my main quest, which is building the company, and obviously as a CEO, building a company often means, you know, motivating a team, solving challenges between team members. Look, the human problems haven't gone away, right? Like, we're still fighting. We still have lots of opinions. What's the best database? You know, what's the best cloud? Even what's the best agents? I'm sure, you know, if we do an exercise of raising your hands, we get 50 opinions about just the best programming language or the best coding framework and whatnot, right? And then I have all my side quests, and that makes me a 12-year-old again. You know, I built a flight dashboard, or I built an app to transcribe all my podcasts. And so you can all prototype all these ideas and see now how the agent works, how our own product works, and ultimately now how modern software development is evolving.
It's fascinating. And it's interesting that you bring up the human element because, you know, you're such a deep technologist. I mean, we just talked about, you know, over the weekend you're probably going to be coding. But when you start thinking about kind of the human element of AI and where we're going in this particular world, you know, is there a human-in-the-loop scenario that's going to be continuous? Or are we looking at a world where it's kind of pure AI running AI?
Well, first of all, you can ask yourself the questions, would you be sitting here if behind us a video would play with our AI avatars, right? Or are you coming here because you actually like being with other humans and because you like listening to real humans, right? And I think the answer for all of us is we are going to decide that we love being together with humans and companies and teams at concerts and so on. And AI is a tool that we're using like we're using our cars and like we're traveling on planes. And the human will not allow the AI to replace that. We will always leverage it as a tool that we use to get to even higher, state of evolution. That's my fundamental belief. And then there's the reality of the ground, and if you have used Claude Code or Codex or ChatGPT, how long does it really run until it has a question back to you? Right? Like the agents today are employees that have like a 5-minute attention span, and then you have 30 of them, and then they all come back. You come out of a meeting. Imagine all your team members in your startup or in your corporation all wait for you to say yes, 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 yes. Right? That's not how we operate. Like we have team members because they have agency, they have autonomy, they have creativity, and they ultimately trust each other. And I don't think we're anywhere near a stage where an agent can replace that. That said, do I drag and drop my tax returns into ChatGPT to find an error that the CPA the accountant could have made? Of course. Do I review legal documents because, let's be honest, a 95-page contract that your lawyer's a term sheet or whatever that your lawyer sent you, you never actually understood that anyway. You trusted somebody else to read it for you and tell you what's good or what's bad. Right? Am I summarizing all the email newsletters that I'm getting with ChatGPT so I don't have to read for 20 minutes what could have been 3 interesting links that I'm extracting? So I think there's a lot of scenarios where it makes my day easier, just in the same way that Steve Jobs had that uniform, right? Like black turtleneck, jeans, and New Balance shoes, because he wanted to reduce the amount of decisions that he has to make in a single day. I think the agents will help us to reduce the low-value decisions or mid-value decisions, so you can focus on the high-value creativity, and that value bar, that is raising every day with the power of these agents.
Super exciting. And how often, your team is brilliant, do you need to check the work of the AI, so to speak, or check the work of the agents? Are you catching errors here and there? Are hallucinations still a thing, or is that something that's being, it's disappearing rapidly?
So you have a team of people in your fund. How often do you check in with them to see, what's working, what investments do they line up?
I think it's a great question. I mean, we're checking on a regular basis. Like, we're constantly monitoring those investments, and we use artificial intelligence actually to, develop theses around categories that we're excited about, or to understand founders better who we're going to back, or to build out, sort of a pattern recognition playbook. Like, what are the experiences of founders that make them succeed, et cetera. But, what's interesting is when we use AI to do that, sometimes it feels like it shoots left, right, and center. Yeah. And one of the things that has occurred to me, and I'd love to hear your perspective here, is I've been noodling on it a lot, is it feels like all these models tell me what I want to hear. Yeah. It makes me feel like I'm a happy customer every time I put in a query. What's the best type of founder? Is the best type of founder someone who has a technical background? Oh yes, Don, they have a technical background, and they very likely went to MIT. And for me, I want a little bit more of a devil's advocate. Yeah. So love to get your view on that.
Yeah, and look, in the same way that you're checking in with your team, if you ever worked, with investors, they often have their partners meeting on Monday. No company operates today where if the boss doesn't check in for 2-3 weeks, everything works in exactly the same path that you expected it to go, right? And the same is true. That's why we have management structures, right?
Super interesting.
It's not a we create these hierarchies for the sake of having a hierarchy. It's because we know I can only manage so many people in a team until I run out of brain space or brain power and don't have time enough to check in and make sure the work is high quality. And the same is true for agents. Of course, you will have to check in with these agents on a recurring basis. Try out, with Claude Code and give it a really big task and see what it produces in 2 hours, and then tell me that it exactly had the right level of quality, of performance, if you will, of craft. Like I love watching YouTube videos of woodworkers, whether it's the guy in Portland that does epoxy tables or the Japanese woodworker that builds all kinds of templates to do other things, and you see how good their craft is. Like, that didn't come overnight. That didn't come from prompting some agent for 3 seconds and saying, oh, I'm now the best developer in the universe. They exercised, they rehearsed, they did it over and over again. And guess what, any popular band, any popular artist, any popular, actor in a theater performance still rehearses, right? And so we gotta keep working with these agents, we gotta keep checking in with them, and only a human can do that, because at the end of the day, you can go on stage and say, well, our website sucks, but that's the agent's fault, right? Like, I as the CEO, it's not my fault, Of course, you're not going to buy this, and the customer's not going to buy it either, right? The customer is going to hold you accountable as a startup founder, as an investor. For, your LPs, your limited partners are holding you accountable for the investment decisions you're making, and not the agent that you have used or slopped together. And I think that's the mindset that we should have. Now, is the horizon shifting where we can have it run longer, do longer running tasks? Yes. But I honestly now, if I have it run for, like the other night I had something run for 2 hours, it created 640 commits in GitHub, 640 commits in 2 hours. And I looked at it and nothing worked, right? And you could now say I prompted it wrong, but sure, it's my fault. But like you can kind of see, if I had to keep running for 20 more hours, I don't think it would have ever gotten to the product that I actually wanted to build.
It's fascinating. And if we kind of take a step back now, building a business, kind of starting from scratch, tell us about the challenges in the very early days of getting this off the ground.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about your experience on that front. There are multiple threads, obviously.
Yeah. And I will answer it, but I will reflect it back to you, because obviously you see it in your portfolio. Well, look, on the one side, it's a very exciting time. I remember the mid-1990s. I was still a teenager in Berlin, so I didn't have the opportunity to build, a Silicon Valley new economy internet startup, right? But I think we have the time that we are in right now feels very similar to that mid-1990s, right? There were a ton of ideas, a ton of, ventures that were out there that hadn't proven themselves. The undiscovered lands that the Starship Enterprise had to go, and the early incumbents, right? Like, remember the first search engine you used was probably like Yahoo or Firebase or Alta Vista or something like that, and nobody said, well, Google will never win, right? Like, Google came and changed the game, Amazon came and changed the game, Facebook changed the game, and now TikTok changed it again, right? Like, and so even if we look at just the internet era, there's over and over has been then a moment when somebody came and disrupted an incumbent. And I think we're in that early phase right now with AI. Yeah, there are big AI research companies, there's big models out there, but we're still in the very early days. Like, look how many people in your friend group actually use AI every single day for their work, right? Like, how many of your family members do that? Like, if you're honest to yourself, how much of your day is actually agent-driven, and how much is still like the same level of work that you did before? Certainly when you go into meetings and burn now an hour with 20 other people in your company discussing something that could have been decided in 2 minutes. So I think this is what life is like as a startup. It's super exciting. It's super early days. It's great to build from greenfield, because you can reinvent a lot of processes, especially in software development, whether it's with Entire or whether it's with how we run support, how we run incident. I'm an investor in a startup called Resolve AI that helps you to SRE, to monitor all your compute resources and alert and maybe fix an outage, because who is excited about getting up in the middle of the night to solve a server problem, right? But at the same time, let's also be clear, I still have banking, I still have insurances. We just got a letter from some New York compensation board that we don't have workers' compensation insurance. No AI agent did that for us. Like, our HR tooling is great, certainly better than what was out there 10 years ago, but a lot, like the payroll runs are still all manually approved, and the bonus payments are in the hiring process, and a lot of, when you hear like SaaS is dead and it's going to be replaced by AI, like, raise your hand if you're really going to self-code, vibe code your tax return system, right? Or your accounting software. You would be crazy to do that, not because you can't write software that quickly does that, but because how much trust do you really have in your own skills of understanding all the nuances of the Greek law and the German law and the US law? So, but what do you think? You're investing obviously in a lot of international.
I mean, for me, it's such a good question. I mean, I think for me, like, it's not about like the idea, it's about the entrepreneur's impulse to solve a particular problem in the early days. It's like their actual struggle experiencing something and then going after that problem, and then that problem becomes a mission that they end up infecting their friends with, their employees with, their partners with, their customers with, and then eventually that creates a sustainable concept that you build around. That's the idea in venture capital, for me at least, around finding successful founders. And with your experience at Microsoft, building GitHub was an absolute no-brainer. and you were like, it's broken, I want to solve this, I want to create something massive around it, and your level of passion was contagious. It was contagious, and it was contagious for a lot of the other investors who came into your round in the very early days. I know we talked about it early on, and you're like, who can actually add value here? How can I bring people in who will actually understand and be able to build with me? And it was a really interesting process.
And I think what you're saying is something that probably applies to every startup founder in the room. The reality is investors do not invest in you because you have cool technology, cool agents, a great vision. That also matters, but at the end of the day, they're all investing into you. They're all investing because they believe you as a founder, as a founding team, can get that idea, that vision, into a huge company. Like Don, you were investors early stage in Kelchi and Brex and Deal. They're all unicorns today, right? So that is what really matters in this age of AI. It's still the human at the center of, the group of humans at the center of these organizations.
Question for you kind of on that front, and this may be a little bit of a kind of controversial thing, but like how sort of like intelligent or like what kind of an IQ does a successful founder have to have at this point versus their psychological push and their desire to create something massive, given artificial intelligence and machines and agents being able to build?
We're here on stage, so I think the first skill that every founder needs to have is storytelling. Like you need to be able to tell a story to the investors, to convince them. That's as brand and marketing as important as the technology, and part of that is the founder. And if you think about the best founders, the best CEOs out there, they're all great storytellers. They have different styles, and they have different accents. You clearly have heard my German accent by now. My fun story is last winter I sat in a ski lift in the Canadian mountains, and I only said hello. And the guy next to me is, where in Germany are you from? And I was like, how the hell do you know my accent? But like, look, storytelling is super important. Brand is super important. Paul Graham has this blog post, the YC founder. And then it's the ability to build a team and the ability to pivot into a different direction because that market is moving so fast. Every time you open your phone today, you see a new model has came out or a new startup has become a unicorn, right? Like the world is moving so fast. As a founder, like the vision that you had a year ago is great as an anchor to your company, but the reality is what's really important for you is that you're able to steer the ship like a speedboat right now, with all the human conflicts that you will have in your company, with all the technology evolving around you. And I think the challenge and the opportunity at the same time is going to be, how do you use AI to make yourself actually more productive and more creative, not how do you spend the most tokens. Right? That's, as a founder, ultimately, at the end of the day, you're running a business, and it matters how much money you're spending versus how much money you're making in the long run, and that's the decision that ultimately sits with you, the CEO and the founder. It's
fascinating. No, this is a very interesting, evolving time. I think everybody give Thomas a round of applause. Thank
Don,
you so
of course.
much.
Thank you so much,
Fantastic having him up on stage here today. A real honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.